Hey everybody, Mrs. K here. So this week we are going to be talking about how to make some basic line patterns, how to take our basic lines and combine them to make interesting designs. So what I did for my piece of paper is folded it into thirds and then folded it in half. Let me show you how to do that. So I have my paper. I folded it until this matched like the same amount of distance, more or less here. And I creased. Then I opened that up. I folded this side in till it touched the crease. And then I folded that. I opened it up again. And then I folded it in half, like a hot dog fold. Here. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different squares to draw in. All right. So we're going to be doing 6 different patterns today. The first one, we're going to draw a checkered board, but we're going to combine it with horizontal lines. So how do we make a checkerboard? Well, you have to do vertical lines. Vertical lines go up and down. And then some horizontal lines. Oh, they should all be the same height. Okay. Horizontal lines go side to side. All right, but we're going to combine it with horizontal lines. So in a traditional checkerboard, you kind of color every one that's at a diagonal and every other diagonal to make them connect. It looks a little bit like this one. Here. But instead of just doing a checkerboard traditionally, we're going to combine it with horizontal lines. So I'm going to start in this first corner box, and I'm going to add little horizontal lines. I touch corners and go to the next box and add horizontal lines. I touch corners and add more horizontal lines. And corners again. Now, how do I know where to go next? Well, I touch corners. Corners. Corner. Corners. And then I just continue, and instead of coloring it in the whole way, I just add little horizontal lines, and that makes my pattern just a little bit more interesting. So our next one is going to be combining thick and thin lines, but at a diagonal. So I'm going to write thick and thin. Plus diagonal. So diagonal lines go at an angle. They can go this way, slashwise, or they can slash the other way. So I'm going to start by drawing on one corner and drawing nice and neat diagonal lines. I'm leaving about a finger space in between, or like a pencil space. I'm going to fill the whole box with diagonal lines. Okay, so these are all pretty thick. I'm going to go back and add a thin little line next to each one. Kind of doubling up that line. So now we have thick and thin. And I'm going to go one step further by coloring in that thin line. So now I have a thick white line and a thin black line. All right, so now I have thick and thin at a diagonal, but I want to make it a little bit more interesting. So I said diagonal lines can go this way at an angle, and they can also go this way at an angle. I'm going to add little in the white spaces, diagonal lines to fill that space. And I'm going to do it on every single one, but you can do it on every other one too. That would also work. I'm leaving about the same amount of distance between each of those little lines, and then trying to go from all the way from the top from one black line all the way to the bottom of the other. So this is a good way to use our diagonal lines, and we use both styles of them essentially. One going one way and one going the other. All right, so far we've used vertical lines that go up and down, horizontal lines that go side to side, and diagonal lines that go at an angle. Okay, they kind of almost make one side of an X. So let's do something that isn't quite a line, but it is a basic pattern called polka dots. So I'm going to draw polka dots, but I'm going to combine them with, instead of filling them all the way in black, with vertical lines. So I'm going to draw circles, and I'm going to try to draw nice and neat circles, but you can make them all sorts of different sizes. And I'm just going to fill that space with circles. Sometimes you might only see part of a circle. All right, so I have my polka dots. So now I'm going to fill them with vertical lines. So I'm not coloring them in all the way. I'll show you on a big one first. I'm going to draw lines that go up and down and fill that space. It's kind of like these ones over here, and it's kind of like this one over here, but it's inside of a shape this time. And you can use whatever shape you want. Polka dots are pretty easy, and they're also something that are very easy to trace. So if you wanted to add a shape, you could use like a pencil to trace around, like a pencil eraser, or you could use a marker cap, or you could use a glue stick, or if you wanted to make something really big, you could use like a cup or a bowl. So now I have my polka dot pattern with vertical lines, lines that are going up and down. All right, let's talk about, the next one down here. We're going to do crisscross lines plus a shape. So crisscross plus a shape. So what are crisscross lines? Crisscross lines are using both sets of diagonals and essentially making X's. But we are not making one big X. We're not making the same X over and over again. Watch what I do. Start in one corner. I make diagonal lines. Then, and I'm leaving like I said, like a finger space or a pencil space in between each one. Then I make the diagonal going the other way. So I start from the other corner. And I leave the same amount of space between as I did on the other side. So now it's like I have a checkerboard that's on an angle, crisscross lines, but we're going to add a shape. So on the inside of these, and you don't have to do all of them if you don't want to, but you should pick, like, I'm going to do like a row, like every other row, or you can do every other row going this way. And I'm going to fill it with a shape. I'm going to fill it with a diamond. Watch what I do. I'm leaving a little white border. I'm drawing a diamond that fits just inside, and then I'm going to color it in black. I'm going to skip down to the next one. This is a good way of taking like a really simple pattern and making it much more detailed and much more interesting, especially if you draw it neatly. It's going to look really good. Okay, so I have one row done. I'm going to skip to the next row that I touch corners with. And then I'm just going to go down that column. It starts to remind me of like a snake pattern. It's not snake skin necessarily, but kind of reminds me of a snake. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of these really fast, and I'll catch up with you in a second. All right, and here's the finished product. I have my crisscross lines filled with my diamonds as my shape. All right, now let's go to the next one. This one I'm going to call Pick 2. So it's not necessarily a pattern, but it can be if you do it in a couple of different things. So this is what I mean by Pick 2. Pick 2 different types of lines. I'm going to pick horizontal lines, and I'm going to pick curved lines, kind of like a rainbow. I'm going to do the horizontal lines first. I'm going to make a horizontal line and then do more horizontal lines underneath of it. Then I'm going to do the rainbow on top. And you can see it's a nice way to combine two different types of lines to make an interesting design. Pick 2. Pretty quick too. All right, last one that we're going to do is a scales pattern. And it only involves one type of line, but they're stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to write scales. You can use this for fish scales or reptile scales or mermaids, whatever you'd like to do. So with scales, you want to do bumpy lines over and over and over again. Watch my first set. And I'm going to make them pretty big because it fills the space quicker. So little bumps. Now, this first set of scales has to go between. So the bump has to be in the middle here. So it has to be like offset, like shifted over a little bit. And then I just fill in the edges. Now the next one has to be, again, it has to match the first one because it has to be offset a little bit. And these ones you can add extra shapes or patterns or lines into if you'd like to, but you don't really have to. The fact that you're just repeating the same thing over and over again in this way makes it pretty detailed. And there we have it. 6 different types of patterns that make your drawings a lot more interesting. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you take the quiz at the end of this lesson. See ya.